So in part 1 we established that the central conflict of A Song of Ice and Fire is actually an ancient war between the children of the forest and the human race. The humans came to their world and appear to have briefly began a peace with them before the ruler, the Three-Eyed Raven, did not pass on his title to his descendant, and so led to war erupting once more between the children of the forest and the Pearl Emperor. Now, it appears that the actual successor of the Three-Eyed Raven, the Jade Emperor, would lead his people in a great exodus out of the east all the way to Westeros, and this Jade Emperor is none other than the mythical Garth Greenhand. So as the giants headed to the west, we find that they appear to have settled briefly in Karth, which is where the ancient Tourmaline Brotherhood would get its name from. The giants then move on and settle Sephorios and the Basilisk Isles. We find oily black stone present on Axe Isle and the Isle of Tears, as well as an oily carved toad idol on the Isle of Toads, showing us our next development in the culture of the giants, which we will see in future locations. Carved animal figures. City of Yin is built from the oily black stone, and we get stories in this region of eyeless cave dwellers, which may be an elaboration on Yin's true purpose. They were using it to activate the site without using weirwoods. It appears that these inhabitants would eventually also interbreed with a children of the forest race, which may be where we find the brindled men come from. Now, continuing on, the giants would settle the Rhoyne River, as the Rhoynar race are notably carriers of their genetics, as they are notably a tall people with dark eyes. And it is mentioned in the World Book, Myr may share blood with the Rhoynar, and so it's possible then that this is a hint that they too are founded by the giants. We know the Rhoynar would come to be seeking wood from Qohor far later in the timeline, and this may be because, as a rival of the children of the forest when they first arrived in the area, they heavily practiced deforestation in their battles against them. And we also would find that the earliest accounts of this land are notable for references to hairy men who live here that rode on unicorns. And as we see, giants are often described as shaggy, hairy giant men. And so likely we can form a link here as well, which implies to us that the beings who inhabit Skagos and also Ib are also likewise described as hairy men, and so they also have links to unicorns, implying a common cultural heritage. We would see that in their voyages, the giants also likely settle in the Summer Isles, as these people too are notably dark-eyed and appear to share naming conventions with the peoples of the Far East, in particular Yi-Ti. The Summer Islanders also like to carve animals as the figurehead of their ships, which seems to be a continuation of the culture that we see from Toad Isle. Now, as this is pre-Cataclysm, the Arm of Dorn is notably not yet broken, and so the westward migration avoids the narrow sea and the lands dead in Old Town and Highgarden, as we know that the High Tower sits atop a black stone maze, and Highgarden likewise is rumoured to have a black stone foundation, and in the ancient times was also notably designed to have a labyrinth between its walls in order to slow invaders. Now, as we know, Garth supposedly founds Highgarden and plants weirwoods there. We can surmise that he did not, in fact, found it, but attacked it, as they are enemies of the children of the forest. And so he took Highgarden from the giants. Notably, one of his sons, John the Oak, is son of a giantess, and since we know that they are enemies of the giants here, it makes sense that what happened was the practice that we see in Westeros of defeating an enemy and then marrying their woman in order to have a claim to the land. So if the giants make the oily black stone, what exactly is it? It seems weird a stone would be oily, so I believe it is not actually stone, but it's in actual fact oily black wood. We know that weirwood turns to stone over time, so the oily black stone is in fact black wood that has turned to stone, similar to weirwood, implying it may actually in fact be weirwood. So we know the weirwoods are fungal infected oak trees, so what are these black trees? We find them all over the world, and it's not clear if they are more or less common than what the weirwoods are. We have nightwoods in Essos, ebony in the Summer Isles, the blue-leaved trees of Carth, and also ironwoods in the north. Notably, these are all sites where the giants will colonize, so there must be a link here. And they do appear to be altered weirwoods of some kind, as the Carth trees create shade of the evening, which works exactly the same way as the weirwood paste in order to create visions. The Summer Islanders are said to have talking trees on which they carve their history that reflects the culture of the weirwoods containing history, implying that since ebony comes from here, these actually might be ebony trees. We see ironwoods in the semi-canon Telltale games. However, since these do in fact utilise the majority of the actual show cast, I'm going to imply that they are in fact canon in some way. And we see that ironwoods burn with a blue flame, implying these are the same trees. We get no indication on what nightwoods are. However, based on the map of Essos, they presumably come from Qohor or the Ifiquevron area. The name Nightwood invokes the Lion of the Night, furthering the weirwood connection here. And we will also see that there appears to be doors across the world featuring black and white woods, sometimes featuring the moon as a detail, furthering the weirwood connection to the moon. And also, some of these woods show that the grains interlock the two colours, implying it is indeed the same wood, somehow corrupted. So what would cause this, as we know weirwoods don't in actual fact die? I think it may be that these are weirwood trees that have in actual fact been struck by lightning, as all these locations may well be places prone to storms, which would mean that as weirwoods are apparently extremely rare, the black trees are possibly even more rare, as they are weirwoods that have been unlucky enough to be hit by lightning. We see in Yin, the black stone is shunned by nature, and this implies it is opposite to the children of the forest, as nature is their embodiment. Likewise in Ashai, it is noted that nothing grows and nothing lives. But the most curious and notable reference is the fact that there are no children in Ashai, which may be George's subtle way of saying that the children of the forest are not welcome there. So perhaps it appears then the lightning purges the wood of spirits, and we see that ghost grass is notable to glow with the souls of the damned. So black wood in essence is the opposite. It is devoid of souls from the overload of lightning strikes. The most interesting clue to this seems to be the fact we get reference to a weirwood that is supposedly dead in this story. However, this weirwood is in the possession of one specifically named House Blackwood. And so I believe the giants in fact use the black wood the same way that weirwoods operate, but with the added bonus of it isn't able to steal souls and is therefore not networked by the children of the forest, which is why the people of Ashai use ebony palanquins and wear wooden masks, most likely made of this wood, which is in fact painted red with a liqueur, but is in actual fact most likely black underneath. It is in aid of hiding their identity, as while weirwoods are unified and contain multiple beings that are all mingled, the blackwood invokes singularity. And so if we continue to follow the migration of the giants, it appears that those in Essos would continue to spread north and found ancient Norvos and also Loraf, where notably maze-like structures are found. These hairy men of Essos would likely go on to found the empire of the Fisher Queens of the Dawn Age in the Great Silver Sea, where they lived on a floating palace, which makes sense being that they are a seafaring race. Most likely was a floating ship which they inhabited. And we would see that our final culture from the Dawn Age appears to be mentioned in the form of Old Gis. This early culture would send out ships and discovers the Summer Islands, branding them demons due to their appearance. Now notably, demons invokes the children of the forest so far, and based on the culture of the talking trees and the tree towns, it seems likely then that the Summer Islanders may have in actual fact supplanted the children of the forest and took their culture when they landed here. It is notable on NAF that the natives appear to actually be children of the forest based on their description, and interestingly enough use a plague to kill anyone who comes near. We also get mention at this early point of slavers from Valyria who visited here, but as we know from the histories, the Valyrians appear to not predate the Long Night. The one thing notably missing in this account is the fact that the Valyrians come by ships and do not actually bring dragons with them. And I believe this is because these early ships are in actual fact proto-Valyrian peoples before they have even created the dragons as a race, who represent our next race out of the Far East, the Onyx Emperor. It is noted that far to the east there are legends of dragons having their origins in both Asshai and also in the Jade Sea. We can surmise that the region known as the Shadow is most likely near Asshai based on the fact that it is referred to as Asshai by the Shadow, and we find that in this area there's a curious race of people said to live here known as the Cities of Bloodless Men. Now, bloodless is a term used to refer to someone who is extremely pale, something akin to albinos, which is a trait that we do see in the Valyrians, so it is entirely possible that these are in actual fact their ancestors. And so the first of these people to head out from the east are seafarers who land on the island of Leng and appear to interbreed with the remnant giant population, dulling down their tourmaline eyes to create the race of Proto-Valyrians, the people of the Onyx Emperor, and featuring grey eyes. And it would be these seafarers who are likely the ones mentioned to have visited the Summer Isles around this time, as although they are not from Valyria, they do still stem from the old bloodline that would eventually found Valyria, and most notably have not yet created the dragons. So we see as these Proto-Valyrians head out towards the west that they most likely settle in Karth as well, and this would explain why later on, when they begin to utilise fused black stones as one of their main design features, that the city walls of Karth will be built of this material as they descend from this Valyrian bloodline. And we would also see that they would reach Sephorios, and from here they would come to interbreed the wyverns with fireworms found in the Valyrian peninsula in order to create dragons, implying that these bloodless men who have no proper name are the nameless people who taught the Valyrians the art of dragons. Now we see that wyverns most notably do have a connection to dragons, as the most common wyvern colours that we see are green, white and brown, which is the same as what we see in dragons, and most notably the largest and most fiercest of wyverns are black, which is also something that we come to see later in the dragons. And interestingly enough, we also find that Sephorios has a myth connected to that we see in the land of the Shrikes, most notably that of lizard people. And this is interesting as this may imply that there were indeed early genetic experiments occurring in order to breed these dragons, which over time has been mistranslated down into these people being lizards rather than people that are breeding lizards. And it would appear that it is not until these Proto-Valyrians take their dragon creation art to Asshai that the dragons would therefore be born properly, hence why dragons are supposedly first created in Asshai, the Shadow, and the Jade Sea. Now, it can be surmised from hints throughout the Targaryen dynasty that the dragon having 3 heads has a deeper meaning, and I believe that Michael Talks About Stuff has the right idea here, that the 3 heads involves a ritual used in the dragon creation and bonding process, and this is what I believe is being misinterpreted in the visions of the Targaryens. The 3 heads are presumably the rider, the dragon, and a sacrificed loved one who ascends their spirit to possess the dragon, strengthening the bond between the rider and the dragon. And we can infer, based on the visions that many Targaryens have received, that this process most likely in some way involves wildfire, as Aegon the Conqueror thought that the 3 heads of the dragon were him and his 2 sisters. However, when we get to the rule of Maegor, we notably have Maegor beginning to create wildfire with his pyromancers.
The substance is fire given form, and we have been perfecting it since the days of Maegor.
And funnily enough, it is around this time that there is some debate over what causes the birth of the dragons, as Maegor did not hatch a dragon egg, but Aenys did. And as we have 3 different Targaryens who have visions about fire in some way, or even wildfire, being connected to the birth of dragons, makes me think that there is something to this, as we see that Aerion drinks wildfire, thinking that he would become a dragon. Aerys thought that he would rise again as a dragon after burning King's Landing with wildfire. And we even see that Egg dies in what appears to be some form of ritualistic burning at Summerhall to rebirth dragon eggs, which may or may not have actually involved wildfire, as we are yet to get proper full detailing on this in the Duncan Egg series. And this may even explain why, after the Dance of the Dragons and the dragons dying out, that wildfire became such a heavily important part of Targaryen rule. It was part of the prophecies. So what exactly is wildfire and where does it come from? Its creation is a mystery, and it appears to take some time to create. It is a very unstable green liquid which is highly flammable and soaks into other materials, allowing them to burn more efficiently, and also it floats on water, so it appears to be some form of oil. And based on what we know, it is used in the creation of dragons that originally occurs in Asshai, which is the only place we know that actually has glowing green liquids, as in Asshai the waters are black by day, but at night they glow green. And among the various magic users we know of that inhabit Asshai, one of those is pyromancers. Now bear in mind that Asshai is a city of oily black stone, which we know to be oily black wood, so that oil is seeping from the city and mixing into the water in the river, making it black, and is reacting with something in there to turn it green and create wildfire. So we can assume then that wildfire is somewhat hydrocarbon-like in nature, being created from wood, and it also appears to be similar to what happens in the real world. If you pour oil into water, it pollutes the water, as the fish that inhabit the river are pale and blind twisted creatures. And since the oily black wood is mistaken for stone, I believe that the glass candles are quite possibly also made of this same black wood substance. They are said to be obsidian, but if you look at the stone of obsidian, it does appear to have a greasy appearance to it, even though it doesn't actually feel that way. And we can see in the real world gemology, ancient peoples misidentified gemstones all the time, based purely on appearance, not knowing anything about their properties, as many rubies are in actual fact lesser red gems, and they're only identified as rubies because they are red. The one major hint then that we get that glass candles are indeed black wood may in fact be that they are usually black, but notably we see one in the Citadel which is green, implying some sort of chemical change is occurring in it, similar to what happens in the waters of Asshai to create wildfire. The one process that comes to mind when I think of this is what happens with copper when it is exposed to sea air. It oxidizes and turns green. So there is some form of oxidation process with the sea air potentially causing the black oil to become wildfire. And if this is indeed the case and wildfire is important to the endgame that we will find in A Song of Ice and Fire, then I believe that Cersei's massive stashes of wildfire she is building up will have a major part to play in the story to come. Now, since we know that the Empire of Old Gis apparently predates the Long Night and that they do come into conflict with the Valyrians, then we can infer that these proto-Valyrians may in actual fact be the ones that they actually come into conflict with, and the Maesters have once again misinterpreted the true histories. And if we look at the 5 Giscari Wars, we see that they actually give us a timeline of the evolution of society in the grasslands of Essos, and we are noted that Old Gis exists alongside Yi, Asshai and the Fisher Queens, all of which predate the Long Night, and Old Gis is destroyed by the Valyrians, so the Valyrians must predate the Long Night. So in our next part, we will look at the races who migrate through the grasslands of Essos, and this migration will be our next gemstone emperor, the Topaz Emperor.